I remember the sunlight on the stained glass windows of St. Michael's, casting rainbow patterns across the polished pews. It was supposed to be the happiest day for my brother, Michael, and his fiancée, Sarah. Our family, tight-knit and traditional, was finally whole again after years of quiet struggles. But as I watched them exchange vows, a truth I'd unearthed just days before sat like a stone in my gut, threatening to crack open the carefully constructed facade of our lives. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that this wedding, this celebration of new beginnings, was built on a lie, and I was about to be the one to expose it. It started subtly, as these things often do. A few weeks before the wedding, I was helping my mother clear out our grandmother's attic, a task we'd put off for years after Nana Rose passed. Dust motes danced in the lone beam of light filtering through the grime-streaked window. Amidst moth-eaten blankets and forgotten photo albums, I found a small, unmarked wooden box tucked deep inside an old cedar chest. It felt heavy, not with jewelry, but with paper. Inside, under a layer of dried potpourri, was a stack of letters, brittle and yellowed with age, tied with a faded ribbon. They were addressed to Nana Rose, in a looping, elegant handwriting I didn't recognize. The postmarks were from the late 1960s, from a small town 2 states over. Curiosity, a trait my mother often lamented, got the better of me. I pulled one out, unfolding it carefully, the paper crinkling like dry leaves. The first line stopped me cold. "Dearest Rose, I know this is a difficult time for you, leaving your child behind." My blood ran cold. Nana Rose never had another child, did she? Not that anyone in our family ever mentioned. My mother, oblivious, was humming along to an old radio tune downstairs, sorting through antique lace. I slipped the letter into my pocket, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I spent the next few days in a haze, devouring the letters in secret. They painted a heartbreaking picture, a young Nana Rose, forced by circumstances, poverty, societal shame, to give up a baby boy for adoption. The letters were from the adoption agency, detailing the process, offering updates on the child, and then, heartbreakingly, from Nana Rose herself, expressing her enduring grief and regret. There were also letters from the adoptive parents, expressing gratitude and sending photos. And that's where the world tilted on its axis. One of the photos, a faded Polaroid of a toddler with a mischievous grin and a shock of sandy blonde hair, was undeniably Michael. My brother, Michael. My stomach churned. It couldn't be. Michael was my mother's son, my father's son. He was ours. This was impossible. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the smiling boy in the photo with the man who was about to marry Sarah. The letters described a closed adoption, but the agency had somehow connected Nana Rose with the adoptive family, allowing for some correspondence, a secret lifeline across the years. A sickening realization began to dawn: if Michael was adopted by his parents, then he wasn't biologically my brother. And if Nana Rose was his birth mother, then who were his adoptive parents? The story I'd been told my entire life about my family began to unravel thread by painful thread. I felt a profound sense of betrayal, not just for myself, but for Michael, who had lived his entire life in the dark. The weight of this secret, now mine, felt crushing. I knew I couldn't keep it to myself, not with the wedding just days away. But how do you drop a bombshell like this without destroying everything? My first instinct was to confront my mother. She was Nana Rose's only child, or so I believed. She had to know. I found her in the kitchen, meticulously arranging canapes on a silver tray for a pre-wedding gathering. Her usually cheerful demeanor was punctuated by a nervous energy, a slight tremor in her hands as she positioned tiny cucumber sandwiches. I remember the smell of her perfume, a light floral scent, suddenly feeling suffocating. "Mom," I started, my voice betraying my attempt at casualness. She looked up, her smile softening. "Everything all right, honey? You look a little pale." I hesitated, the letters burning a hole in my pocket. "How do you ask your mother if your brother isn't really your brother?" "Mom," I tried again, "did Nana Rose ever talk about having another child? Before you?" Her eyes, usually so warm, flickered, a subtle shift I barely caught. She quickly averted her gaze, fussing with a napkin. "What a strange question, sweetie." "No, of course not. She only had me." Her voice was too quick, too dismissive. It confirmed my fears. She knew. She had to know. The implication was staggering. Not only was Michael adopted, but my own mother had kept this secret from me, from all of us, for decades. The entire family history, the narrative of our lineage, felt like a cleverly constructed lie. I pressed on, my voice firmer now. "Mom, I found some letters in Nana Rose's attic. They talk about a baby boy. Michael." The color drained from her face. The silver tray clattered against the counter, forgotten. Her hands went to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and sorrow. The air in the kitchen grew heavy, thick with unspoken truths. You shouldn't have been up there," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That was private." It wasn't an admission, but it was confirmation enough. Her avoidance, her sudden defensiveness, spoke volumes. My mother, my rock, my confidant, had been complicit in this deception. I felt a profound sense of isolation, as if the ground beneath my feet had given way. "Mom, who are Michael's real parents?" I asked, the words feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "It's complicated, darling. So complicated. Nana Rose, she just wanted to protect everyone. To give Michael a good life. Protect everyone. By building a foundation of lies." The betrayal felt sharp, a cutting edge that sliced through years of assumed trust. I needed to understand the full extent of the deception, and I knew my mother, despite her distress, was only going to give me pieces. The wedding loomed, a glittering, deceptive beacon, and I was holding the match. The pre-wedding dinner was a chaotic symphony of forced cheer. Relatives from both sides mingled awkwardly, clinking glasses, sharing anecdotes. Michael, looking impossibly handsome in his charcoal suit, laughed easily with Sarah's father, completely oblivious to the impending storm. Sarah, radiant in a cream dress, glowed with happiness. Every smile, every toast, felt like a fresh wound. I couldn't eat. The food, usually comforting, tasted like ash. My gaze kept drifting to my mother, who sat across the table, picking at her salad, her eyes darting nervously around the room. I could see the strain in her shoulders, the faint lines of worry etched around her mouth. It was clear she was carrying the same burden, perhaps even heavier, as she'd been holding it for decades. After dinner, as people started to disperse, I cornered her, my voice low and urgent. "Mom, we need to talk. All of us. Before the wedding." She flinched, her eyes pleading. "Please, not tonight, honey. Not here. Tonight. Now. This can't wait." My tone left no room for argument. I knew I was being hard on her, but the thought of Michael walking down that aisle, building a new life on such a shaky foundation, was unbearable. I managed to gather my father and my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, into the study, a dimly lit room usually reserved for quiet contemplation. My father, a stoic man of few words, looked at me with a questioning frown. Aunt Carol, usually the family gossip, looked unusually somber. My mother sat stiffly on the edge of an armchair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. I laid the letters on the polished mahogany desk. "I found these in Nana Rose's attic," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "They tell a different story about Michael." I watched as my father's eyes scanned the faded script, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing sentence. Aunt Carol gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. My mother, her face tear-streaked, finally broke. She started to speak, her voice choked with emotion, filling in the gaps that the letters hinted at. Nana Rose, a young woman in a conservative era, had fallen pregnant out of wedlock. The shame, the societal pressure, had been immense. Her parents, desperate to avoid scandal, had forced her to give up the baby. My mother had been a young child herself when Michael was adopted into the family, taken in by her own parents as their second child, to conceal the truth. My father had been told some version of the story when he and my mother married, but the full extent of the deception, the ongoing correspondence, had been kept even from him. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by my mother's soft sobs. The truth, in all its raw, painful detail, hung heavy in the air. The realization that my grandparents, whom I adored, had orchestrated such a complex, heartbreaking lie, was devastating. And my parents, out of a misguided sense of loyalty and protection, had perpetuated it. The wedding, now less than 24 hours away, felt like a cruel joke. Michael deserved to know. He deserved the truth, no matter how painful. The decision was made. The secret, after decades, was finally out. But the question remained, who would tell Michael, and when? The weight of what was to come settled over us like a shroud. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind replayed every interaction, every childhood memory with Michael, now seen through this new, distorted lens. Our shared laughter, our sibling squabbles, the unquestioning bond we'd always had, it all felt like a fragile illusion. Was he really my brother? Biologically, no. But emotionally, he was everything. The concept of family, once so solid, had splintered into 1,000 pieces. I kept picturing Michael's face when he found out. The joyful anticipation he held for his wedding day. How could I be the one to shatter that? But how could I let him marry Sarah, begin a new life, without knowing who he truly was? It felt like a moral imperative, a duty I couldn't shirk, no matter how much it tore me apart. My mother had gone to bed, utterly spent, leaving me with the unbearable task of deciding when and how to tell him. My father, usually so resolute, was equally at a loss. "He deserves to know, honey," he'd said, his voice gravelly. "But the timing? I just don't know." I walked out to the quiet garden, the cool night air a welcome balm on my feverish skin. The scent of jasmine hung heavy. I looked up at the stars, feeling infinitesimally small against the vastness of the universe. The magnitude of this secret, kept for so long, felt almost cosmic. I pulled out my phone, contemplating calling Michael. But what would I say? "Hey, before you get married tomorrow, turns out you're adopted, and our grandmother is your birth mother, and our parents aren't actually your parents." The words were monstrous. I couldn't just drop it over the phone. He deserved a proper conversation, a chance to process. But there was no good time for news like this. No soft landing. It was going to be a gut punch, no matter what. The wedding was set for 2 p.m. the next day. A small, intimate ceremony, followed by a reception at a local vineyard. There was no window between now and then for a private conversation without causing suspicion or alarm. It was either tell him before the ceremony, risking a complete meltdown and cancellation, or let him go through with it, knowing that a lie underpinned his biggest day. The thought of letting him live another day in ignorance gnawed at me. The image of Sarah, so trusting and happy, also weighed heavily. She was marrying into this family, and she deserved to know the full truth about her future husband's origins, too. This wasn't just Michael's secret, it was now a secret that would define their marriage. As the first hint of dawn painted the sky, I made my decision. It was a brutal choice, one I knew would devastate him, and perhaps irrevocably damage our family. But the alternative, perpetuating the lie, felt worse. It felt dishonest to his future, to his identity, and to the very meaning of family. The truth had to come out, and I, the accidental discoverer, was now tasked with being its reluctant messenger. The sun began to rise, bathing the garden in a soft, orange glow, a stark contrast to the darkness that had settled in my soul. The morning of the wedding was a blur of nervous activity. Hair and makeup appointments, last-minute adjustments to dresses, the general hum of pre-ceremony excitement. I moved through it all like a ghost, my mind elsewhere, rehearsing the words I would have to say. Michael, vibrant and full of nervous energy, came to my room to see if I needed anything, his smile bright. "Can you believe it's finally happening?" he asked, his eyes sparkling. "I'm marrying Sarah." I managed a weak smile, my throat tight. The weight of what I knew, what I was about to do, was suffocating. I wanted to hug him, to tell him everything then and there, but the chaos of the morning was not the place. The church, when we arrived, was beautiful. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and beeswax. Guests filled the pews, a sea of smiling faces, all oblivious. Sarah walked down the aisle, breathtaking in her white gown, her father beaming beside her. Michael's eyes were fixed on her, full of adoration. He was so happy. It felt like sacrilege to even consider disturbing this moment. As the ceremony progressed, my heart hammered against my ribs. "Do you, Michael, take Sarah?" The officiant's voice boomed, filling the sacred space. Each word felt like a countdown. My hands were clammy, my palms slick with sweat. I kept glancing at my mother in the front pew, her face pale, her gaze fixed on Michael, a silent, knowing plea in her eyes. If anyone here knows of any reason why this couple should not be lawfully wedded, speak now or forever hold your peace." The traditional words, usually a formality, suddenly resonated with a terrifying power. This was it. This was my moment. My heart leaped into my throat. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to stay silent, to let them have their day. But another voice, a quieter, more insistent one, reminded me of the truth, of the foundation of lies, of Michael's right to know. I gripped the wooden pew, my knuckles white. My breathing hitched. The silence in the church felt immense, stretched taut, waiting. I could feel my mother's eyes on me, a mixture of fear and dread. The officiant paused, a natural beat in the ceremony, before continuing. I had missed my window. Or had I? My mind was racing, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I couldn't let it happen, not like this. Not without him knowing. But I couldn't just shout it out in the middle of his vows. That would be cruel, unforgivable. I needed a different plan, a different moment. The rings were exchanged, the kiss shared, and the congregation erupted in applause. Michael and Sarah, husband and wife, walked back down the aisle, their faces alight with joy. I watched them go, a hollow ache in my chest. The first part of the wedding was over. The reception was next. I knew, with a terrible certainty, that the truth would come out there. I had to make it happen. The reception was a blur of champagne flutes, heartfelt speeches, and a joyous energy that felt increasingly alien to me. The vineyard setting was stunning, golden hour light filtering through the grapevines, laughter echoing across the patio. Michael and Sarah danced their first dance, swaying gently to a classic love song, completely absorbed in each other. I watched them, my chest aching. This was beautiful, real love. And I was about to contaminate it. I found my mother by the dessert table, nervously arranging cupcakes. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Please, honey," she whispered, "not now. Not tonight." "Mom, I can't," I replied, my voice firm. "He deserves to know." "They both do." I knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't just blurt it out during a toast. That would be a catastrophic explosion, not a revelation. I needed to create a space, a moment where the truth could land with some semblance of dignity, however painful. During a brief lull in the music, just before the cutting of the cake, I approached Michael and Sarah, who were holding hands, smiling at each other. "Michael, Sarah," I began, my voice clear enough to carry to those nearby, but not so loud as to stop the entire party. "Before you cut the cake, there's something important I need to share with you both, something about our family history that has just come to light." Michael's smile faltered, replaced by a look of confusion. Sarah's brow furrowed. My mother, from across the room, had frozen, her face ashen. A hush began to fall over the immediate vicinity, like a ripple. People instinctively sensed the shift in atmosphere. "I recently found some letters," I continued, pulling one from my clutch, letters from Nana Rose. "They reveal that Michael was adopted into our family, that Nana Rose was his birth mother, and that his biological parents, well, our parents, adopted him to protect Nana Rose from scandal." I held up the letter, a silent testament. The words hung in the air, heavy, shocking. The joyful chatter of the reception died down, replaced by a stunned silence. Michael's face went from confusion to a mask of disbelief, then horror. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide as she looked from me to Michael, then to my mother, who had finally collapsed into a nearby chair, openly weeping. My father, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward, his face etched with pain, a silent confirmation of my words. The silence stretched, a vacuum sucking all the air out of the room. This wasn't the dramatic yell I'd feared, but a quiet, devastating unveiling. The truth, finally, was out. And the silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The silence didn't last long. A murmur started, a ripple of whispered questions and gasps that spread through the crowd. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, their party smiles replaced by expressions of shock and confusion. Michael, though, remained utterly still, his eyes fixed on me, then on my parents, a raw, primal pain radiating from him. Sarah, her hand still at her mouth, looked utterly bewildered, her eyes welling with tears. "Is this true?" Michael's voice was barely a whisper, hoarse with disbelief, directed at my mother. My mother, tears streaming down her face, could only nod, unable to speak. My father put a comforting hand on her shoulder, his own face a picture of remorse. Michael turned back to me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "How long have you known?" he demanded, his voice rising now, cutting through the murmurs. "Why would you do this? Here. Now." I felt a pang of guilt, a sharp stab, but I held his gaze. "I found out just days ago, Michael. I had to. You deserve to know the truth before you started your new life." Sarah, regaining some composure, squeezed Michael's arm. "Michael, what is happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Who are your parents?" The weight of that question, the sudden unraveling of his entire identity, was palpable. Michael pulled away from Sarah's touch, looking utterly lost. He stumbled backward, away from the cutting of the cake, away from the music, away from the shattered illusion of his wedding day. He looked at my mother, his face a contorted mask of pain. "You lied to me. My whole life. All of you." He turned to leave, pushing past bewildered guests, heading towards the exit. Sarah cried out his name, reaching for him, but he was already gone. The reception, moments before a vibrant celebration, had imploded. The music stopped. The DJ, sensing the gravity of the situation, slowly faded the celebratory tunes. People began to gather their belongings, their whispers growing louder, morphing from confusion to quiet judgment. My mother was inconsolable, my father trying to comfort her, both of them looking utterly devastated. I stood there, the letter still clutched in my hand, the villain of the day. The satisfaction of exposing the truth was utterly overshadowed by the raw pain I had inflicted. I had done what I believed was right, but the cost was immediate and devastating. The happy, joyous wedding had dissolved into a scene of heartache and chaos, a family's carefully constructed life finally crumbling in front of everyone. The silence returned, this time heavy with the unspoken questions, the broken trust, and the shattered hopes of a wedding day that had gone horribly, irrevocably wrong. The days following the wedding were a wasteland of silence and recrimination. Michael vanished. His phone went straight to voicemail. Sarah, devastated and confused, left for her parents' house, saying she needed time to process. Our once vibrant family home felt like a mausoleum, filled with unspoken accusations and heavy regrets. My parents were a wreck. My mother, particularly, was consumed by guilt. She barely ate, her eyes constantly red from crying. "I just wanted to protect him," she'd sobbed repeatedly, "to protect our family. Nana Rose made me promise." My father, though less outwardly emotional, carried a quiet burden of remorse. He'd admitted he should have pushed for the truth to come out years ago, but the fear of fracturing the family had kept him silent. My Aunt Carol called, her voice laced with a mixture of sympathy and thinly veiled disapproval. "You shouldn't have done it like that," she'd admonished. There were other ways. Perhaps there were. But in the heat of the moment, with the wedding proceeding on a lie, I had acted on impulse and a fierce belief that Michael deserved the truth. I felt like an outcast, the family pariah. The one who had destroyed the perfect picture. My own heart ached with the pain I'd caused, but a stubborn conviction remained: the truth, no matter how ugly, was always better than a beautiful lie. I spent hours staring at the letters, rereading Nana Rose's heartfelt pleas, her expressions of eternal love for the son she couldn't keep. It was a tragic story, born of a different time, a different set of social rules. But those rules had forced a generational secret that had finally exploded. A week after the wedding, a single text message arrived from Sarah. "He's with me. He's okay. He needs time." It was a small mercy, a thread of hope that Michael hadn't completely cut himself off. I tried to reach out to him, sending him a long, heartfelt message, explaining my reasoning, expressing my love, acknowledging the immense pain I had caused. No reply. The silence from him was deafening. It felt like a part of me had been ripped away. The bond we shared, the one I had always cherished, felt irrevocably broken. The future of our family, once so clear, was now shrouded in uncertainty. Would Michael ever forgive us? Would Sarah stay? Would we ever be a family again, even if the definition of family had fundamentally changed? The questions lingered, unanswered, hanging heavy in the air like the scent of fading lilies in an empty church. 2 weeks after the wedding, Michael finally called. His voice was cold, distant, a stranger's voice on the other end of the line. "I need to talk," he said, "but not with them." He meant our parents. He wanted to meet, just Sarah and me, at a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of town. The air between us was thick with tension when we met. Sarah sat beside him, her hand resting protectively on his arm, her eyes wary. Michael's face was gaunt, his eyes shadowed, the joy that had radiated from him just weeks before completely extinguished. "Why?" he asked, his voice low, his gaze fixed on me. "Why did you do it that way? On my wedding day?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Michael, I'm so sorry for the pain I caused. Truly. But I found the letters just days before. I tried to talk to Mom, to get her to tell you. She wouldn't. She couldn't. I couldn't let you marry Sarah, start your life, with such a fundamental lie at the core of your identity. You deserve to know." I slid the stack of letters across the table to him. "These are for you. From Nana Rose. And from the adoption agency. They tell the whole story." He hesitated, then picked them up, his fingers tracing the faded ink. Sarah leaned in, reading over his shoulder. I watched as his expression softened, a flicker of something beyond anger in his eyes, confusion, sadness, a dawning understanding. "So Nana Rose, she was my mother," he whispered, the words heavy with disbelief. "And Mom and Dad, they're not." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "They are your parents, Michael. They raised you, they loved you. But biologically, Nana Rose was your birth mother, and her parents, our grandparents, are actually your adoptive parents." The concept was convoluted, painful. He read in silence for a long time, Sarah occasionally murmuring a question, him answering in a low voice. The raw anger slowly began to recede, replaced by a profound sadness. I don't even know what I feel," he finally said, looking up, his eyes glassy. "My whole life, it's like a dream I just woke up from." "I know," I said, my voice choked. "It's a lot. And I'm so sorry you had to find out like this." He looked at Sarah, a silent communication passing between them. Then he turned back to me. "It doesn't change anything between us," he said, his voice a little stronger now. "You're still my sister. Always will be. But I need to understand this. And I need space from Mom and Dad for a while." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. It was a recognition of our bond, however fractured. It was a fragile bridge being built across the chasm of lies. The truth had come out, and the healing, however slow and painful, could finally begin. The conversation at the coffee shop was the beginning of a long, arduous process. Michael and Sarah decided to take a honeymoon trip, a quiet escape to process everything. They needed to redefine their understanding of family, of trust, and of Michael's own identity, away from the immediate family turmoil. During their absence, my parents and I began our own difficult conversations. My mother, still heartbroken, slowly started to articulate the immense pressure she felt from her own parents, Nana Rose's parents, to maintain the secrecy. The fear of shame, the desire to protect Michael from societal judgment, had driven their actions. It didn't excuse it, but it offered a glimpse into the generational trauma and the impossible choices people made in a different era. I learned that our grandparents had truly loved Michael as their own, raising him with genuine affection, but the secret had always been a silent shadow. When Michael returned, he slowly began to engage with our parents, tentative at first, then with more direct, raw conversations. He demanded to know every detail, every nuance of the adoption, of Nana Rose's life before and after. He sought out the adoption agency, now long defunct, and managed to find some additional records, filling in more pieces of his history. Sarah, remarkably, stood by him through it all. Her strength and unwavering support were a testament to their love, a foundation that, despite the shocking revelation, proved to be resilient. She became his anchor as he navigated the tumultuous waters of his rediscovered identity. The wedding, of course, was never officially rescheduled in the traditional sense. Michael and Sarah decided to have a small, private ceremony, just the two of them, a quiet affirmation of their love and commitment, free from the weight of family secrets. It wasn't the grand celebration we'd all planned, but it was authentic, and it was theirs. Our family, once a seemingly perfect unit, was now more like a mosaic, shattered and reassembled. There were still cracks, visible fissures of pain and mistrust, but also new patterns of understanding and empathy. Michael now knew the full story of his origins, a painful but ultimately liberating truth. He had found a deeper connection to Nana Rose, a sense of belonging to a lineage he never knew existed. He also learned to forgive, slowly, my parents for their silence, understanding the complex web of circumstances that led to the deception. We are still figuring things out. The family dynamic is permanently altered, more honest, perhaps, but also more fragile. The truth came out at a wedding, in the most public and painful way imaginable. It destroyed a celebration, but in doing so, it laid bare the foundations of our family, forcing us to rebuild on something real. The path to healing is long, but for the first time in decades, it's a path we're walking together, in the light. The wedding day will forever be etched in our memories, not as a celebration of love, but as the day a decades-long secret finally exploded, revealing the raw, complicated truth of our family. It cost us dearly, a wedding shattered, trust broken, and the innocence of an assumed past. But in the wreckage, we found a painful clarity, a chance to rebuild on honesty. Michael is now on his own journey of understanding his identity, and our family is learning what it means to truly heal. If you've ever faced a truth that changed everything, you know the weight of that choice. Hit the subscribe button to hear more stories of lives irrevocably changed when dark truths come to light.